Hello, today is Tuesday, December 15th, and today we are going to climb Pass Mountain, which is right over there on the far, let's see, that would be the north side of this ridgeline here. This one that looks taller from this viewpoint is the South Pass Mountain Peak. Christine and I did that last week as a part of actually attempting to do Pass Mountain. We thought it would be a lot simpler because we saw a trail on Trail Run Project, and we thought that meant it would be a pretty easy to follow route. But once we got to the ridgeline, that turned out to not be the case, and we turned around because we were going to be hitting sunset pretty soon. So we turned around, and because of that, I originally wasn't going to do a trip report for this one either. But now that I know this one requires a little bit more off-trail travel, now we'll have a trip report. There are multiple places you can start this and multiple routes you can take to do Pass Mountain. What I'm doing today is I'm actually starting at Usery Mountain Regional Park. The advantage to that is you get to start up Wind Cave and get to see the Wind Cave, which is pretty cool. It's actually really nice at sunset too, as we found out last week. One disadvantage is that it does have an entry fee required to get into the park, and the gates do close at 8 p.m. just in case you were planning on doing this a little bit later. This time of year it doesn't make too much sense since the sun does set around 5. But should be a pretty good route. I'm going to go up Wind Cave, going to go across the ridge north, and then I'm going to make a determination what might be the best way to come back once I am up on the summit. Whether that's cutting the North Ridge all the way down, or cutting down on the east side of the mountain back down to the loop trail and then coming all the way back around, or maybe just retracing my steps back. But we'll see when we get up there. Coming up now to the destination of the Wind Cave Trail, and that will also mark the end of the official trail. There's a pretty good marking up to the South Peak, but from there it'll be a little bit different. Wind Cave has pretty great views at sunset. I think I mentioned that earlier. But pretty cool, just eroded section out of the mountain. Can also be pretty busy up here. Alright, so this is the end of the official trail, as I mentioned. We'll be continuing up the mountain and right past Wind Cave. You see that there's a sign saying proceed at your own risk. But this first part, at least up to the South Peak, has pretty good marking. I'll note that out on the way up. Alright, so even though the sign back there noted to travel at your own risk, there was someone nice enough to mark out a use path with these blue dots and blue arrows. Sometimes they're white, but for the most part they're blue. This use path takes you actually up to the very summit of the South Peak, South Pass Mountain. But the trail markers, these blue dots, do not continue past that. I think I've heard there are some cairns up there, but for the most part we'll just be following that ridge line once we get up to it. So with the help of these blue dots and blue arrows, we have gained the main ridge of Pass Mountain actually fairly easily. Maybe not easy, but it was very straightforward. As you can see from this right arrow, the markers actually continue up to the South Peak that just is above us right now. What we're actually going to do is continue on the ridgeline and follow it to the main summit, which is just beyond that little bump that you see there to the north. Now this, as I mentioned, this was marked as a trail on trail run project, I would probably dispute that fact. I wouldn't mind marking this on maybe even something like hiking project, and definitely something like Peakbagger, but I'm not sure that something like this would be necessarily appropriate on a trail run project. We've made it about halfway across the ridgeline right now, and we've gotten to a point where there'll be a little bit of a scramble here. But as you can see, someone's nice enough to actually mark this route with white dots. So we have a little bit of a route established here. So we've just made it up and through that last shot I showed you with the scrambling, and it actually looks like the scrambling nature of this part is going to extend even further. As you can see, we've ended up in a little bit of a rocky spot, and the rocks seem to continue pretty well, so it's going to be scrambly until we get at least up to that upper ridge line in the distance there. With this, I would just recommend not coming out here if you aren't comfortable with this kind of adventure. So that may have been the crux. It looks like it's starting to even out a little bit here. Get a little bit less scrambly, maybe a little bit more rock step, kind of rock hopping instead. Yeah, at this point, I'm not using my hands too much. But again, I think even with that crux, if you're not comfortable scrambling, I recommend getting comfortable, because it's pretty fun, and then coming out. I think we might be on terrain like this until we get to the summit, which is actually pretty stark contrast to the scrambly parts. But again, that really wasn't too difficult at all. Definitely low class 3, if that is such a thing. It does look like we're getting into a little bit more cacti territory up here. That was a nice part about the rocky section, is there really weren't that many cacti to worry about, so there wasn't too much concern about hand placement while you're going up. But it looks like we've got our view of the summit right now, straight across the way. Looks like we might have to do just a little bit of a drop and then our final ascent, and we'll be there. Alright, there's another view to the South Peak. And unfortunately, as I tend to do, somewhat frequently I suppose, I got fooled by a false summit. Here we are on this middle sub-peak of Pass Mountain. I don't know why I missed that when I was looking up ahead when I was down at the bottom giving the intro, but there is the actual peak itself. Alright, we've made it to the summit of Pass Mountain. There's the south ridgeline that we just cut across. This is a look east to the rest of the Goldfield Mountains and to the superstitions in the distance. Here's a look north. Oh, also we got 4 peaks over there in the distance too. Look north to the rest of the Mazatals, Tonto National Forest. Looking across the way now, straight across the way is Usery Mountains. We just did a trip report about that not too long ago. Just over the shoulder of the Userys, you can see Red Mountain or McDowell Peak, and then further in distance you can see the McDowell Mountain Range themselves. I think there are a couple different options that people have taken to get off this mountain. One is straight all the way down the North Ridge back to the Bulldog Canyon trailhead, and then the other is halfway through this little saddle area to that northern bump, cut down, and then cut back down to the main loop trail, the Pass Mountain Loop Trail. And I think that's the way I'm going to take, because there's a lot less elevation loss that way to the trail, and a lot less horizontal distance too, to get ourselves back to the trail. And that way we can get moving on the trail, and that'll be a little bit quicker than taking the ridge all the way back down to the trailhead. All right, here we are down at the saddle, just below the summit, or north of the summit. The path is actually pretty easy to follow over here, and the shrub is much cleaner. So far on this northern aspect, it's been much quicker traveling. I think this is the point where the path diverges to where I was initially thinking I was going to head down the east side of the mountain and down to the trail. Looking at the topo map, it looks like this links back up to the trail down at about 25-50 feet. Right now we're just above the 3,200 foot contour line. So we'd be dropping about 600 feet. If I look and do the same thing for when we take the northern ridge down to the trail, it looks like it actually catches up only 100 feet lower at about 2,400 feet. And judging off of the contours on the topo map, it actually looks like the north ridge line is going to be a little less steep. And I think this canyon looks pretty steep down here, and maybe even a little bushy. So I think I'm going to change my plans again and head down the north ridge line, especially because right now this use trail is incredibly clean and well established, and I'm hoping this continues for the rest of the way down the north ridge line. All right, there's our look back at the summit block. We've reached the northern end of this main ridge line here, and you can see that we're actually going to follow this skinny ridge here. I'm not sure if you can quite pick it out from the video, but there's a pretty well-worn trail that goes straight across the apex of that ridge there, and then skirts below that sub little block there, and then continues straight on down that ridge that's pointing straight to the left from this view here. And then it looks like it meets up pretty shortly with the main trail, so it should be a pretty quick work out of this. It looks pretty well worn and pretty clean, so I'm actually excited about this. We're just going to cut back to get off this part of the ridgeline here to the left, since that was a little bit of a cliff that I was standing on for that viewpoint. But so far, looks really easy to follow. All right, we made about halfway down the north ridge. Here's another glimpse at the summit and that sub-block that we were looking at before. It's been actually really fun and easy way down this way. As you can see, this trail is pretty wide open, pretty well worn, and not too steep. We're currently just at about the 2,700 foot contour line, and as I mentioned before, we're going to be meeting up with the trail just at about 2,500 feet of elevation, maybe a little bit less. It'll be approximately down here. I can't quite pick out the trail from here, but looking at the map, I think we're pretty close. And actually, right now I see some mountain bikers and some horseback riders, so now I think we're very close. I think we'll just follow one of these clean sub-ridges down, and we'll be there pretty soon. All right, so we're actually coming right up on the main Pass Mountain Loop Trail now. Just ran into a friendly horse rider, just had another runner pass by. This is the Pass Mountain Loop Trail here. And we actually came out exactly at the junction with the trail that goes back to the Bulldog Canyon trailhead that's in the forest, which would be the freeway to park for this trip. And as I mentioned a little bit further up, that would be definitely the shorter way to do this route, definitely the less technical way to do this route, and the cleaner and easier to follow way. So if you're looking for the quickest trip up to the summit, that'd be the way to go. But if you want to make an adventure out of it, or you'd like to make a loop out of it when you can, this is a little bit more of a longer way to go and you get some scrambling in there, but overall it's quite an adventure. And for me, I always like to get a loop out of it whenever I can instead of an out and back. Get to see quite a bit more on a single trip. But here we go. We turned left when we came out of the ridgeline onto the Pass Mountain Trail, and it's just going to be a nice trail run back to the car from here. All right, we are approaching the return to the trailhead. So I thought I'd give my update before it gets a little too dark and you can't see me anymore. There's our last look of the giant monolith that is Pass Mountain. Made it all the way to the top today. Pass Mountain is at 3,312 feet, has a prominence of 1,142 feet. And overall trip for this one, sorry for the weird angle at the moment, 5.5 miles, maybe a little bit over by the time I get back. Like I said, if you're looking for a shorter route and a cleaner route, you could start at the Bulldog Canyon, and I think that would probably end up being only about a 2.5 mile round trip, peakbagging trip for you. So if you're looking for shorter, go that way. If you're looking for adventure, if you want to see the wind cave, head up this way. It's a pretty fun route, and 5.5 miles isn't that long either, whether you're running or hiking. So overall, very fun trip. I really enjoyed myself today. Always enjoy myself in these regional parks. I feel like the fauna here are always so great. Always really big saguaros. So as usual, I'd like to thank all the people that have made this possible today. Maricopa County and the regional parks for preserving this space. I'd like to thank trail builders for this nice Pass Mountain Trail and the Wind Cave Trail. Map builders, very useful today too. Checking out the contour lines, trying to find my best way down. All the people that have come before me to kind of tread this path down pretty well, made it pretty easy to follow. And of course, the original stewards of this land, which over here are the Maricopa peoples and the Pima peoples.